Hello, friends! Welcome to a world where power decides destinies, and one mistake can cost a life. Where kings call their own children a mistake, and love comes from the last place you would ever expect. My name is Karina, and I'm happy to see each of you on my channel. Today we will dive into a story about a girl rejected from birth, about two princes who chose her despite everything, and about a secret capable of destroying an entire kingdom. This is a story about betrayal that leaves scars, and about hope that appears even where it seems nothing is left. Make yourselves comfortable, our story begins. Through the halls of the Alpha King's palace, piercing cries echo without end. Raw, merciless cries from two newborn princes abandoned by their mother. They say the queen ran away with her lover, leaving the Alpha King heartbroken and her sons inconsolable. And now, the heirs of the kingdom reject every attempt at comfort. Every wet nurse fails. Every healer is dismissed. Until Josie appears, a wolfless orphan servant mocked for lacking what every shifter is born with. She was never meant to touch royal blood. But when desperation brings her to the princess, something forbidden awakens. The crying stops. The princess calm in her arms. They cling to her scent and reject everyone else. And so the court is forced to confront a troubling question. What kind of bond can form before words, before choice, strong enough to tie the fate of two Alpha princes to a wolfless servant? And how will the Alpha King react when he discovers that his sons refuse to be separated from their insignificant mate? Chapter 1. Young Josie stood elbow-deep in dishwater so filthy it had turned the color of old meat. Chef Margrave would not accept the work until he could see his reflection at the bottom. Around her, the evening shift was ending in its usual chaos. Well-dressed servants entered carrying silver trays barely scraped clean, their elegant livery somehow making the waste they carried seem almost noble. They dumped the trays into Josie's sink without even glancing her way. A wave of dirty water splashed directly against her chest. Josie gasped, stumbling back as bits of grease and gristle clung to her already stained apron. She looked up out of habit. Some small, foolish part of her still expected an apology. But the servant was already turning away, laughing at something his companion had said. "Did you hear those pups in the East Wing? Non-stop. The king hasn't slept." "Shh, not here." They disappeared through the doorway, and Josie slowly exhaled before returning to the pot. "One day," she whispered to herself, "one day, everyone else will see in you what he saw." "Who are you talking to?" The voice cut through the kitchen, and Josie's stomach tightened. She turned and saw Norma standing in the doorway, her clean apron spotless in a way Josie's never was. At 10 years old, Norma was 2 years younger than Josie, but she had a wolf, and that changed everything. "No one," Josie said quickly. She lowered her eyes to the pot in her hands and scrubbed harder, though the copper already gleamed. "Don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction." An apple core struck her temple, hard enough to make her vision blur. She flinched, her hands jerking in the water, and the pot slipped from her grip, crashing back down with a loud splash. Another burst of laughter followed. Not just the children now. Some of the kitchen maids had turned to watch as well. "Hey!" Chef Margrave's voice thundered across the kitchen. "Clean yourself up and get out of my kitchen. You're dripping all over the floor." "Yes, Chef," Josie whispered. She grabbed a rag. It smelled of onions and something sour, and hurried out. Bitter, mocking laughter followed her down the corridor all the way to her room. Well, room was generous. It had once been a storage closet, and there was barely enough space for a thin straw mattress. Josie closed the door behind her and stood in the darkness. Somewhere far above, muffled by stone and distance, the sound came again, thin and trembling, crying. It never stopped. Not truly, never. Sometimes it faded enough that you could almost forget it was there. But then it returned, sharp and relentless, a reminder that something in the palace was broken in a way no one could fix. Josie sank onto the mattress and wrapped her arms around her knees. And, as always when she needed comfort, she thought of him, of Alpha King Tristan. She closed her eyes and remembered. She had been very young, 5, maybe 6, and somehow she had gotten lost in the palace gardens. And then he had appeared, tall, glowing in the afternoon light, dressed in hunting clothes. He had knelt beside her in the grass, his voice so kind. "What do we have here, little lost lamb?" He had lifted her as though she weighed nothing, held her against his chest, and carried her back to the kitchen himself. She remembered how pale Paula's face had gone when she saw who was carrying Josie. How Tristan had smiled and said something about how she should be cared for, that there would be a place for her here despite her condition. Even then, Josie understood what he meant, despite the fact that she had no wolf. "The king saved you," Josie whispered into the darkness. "The king saved you." It was proof. Proof that she was not worthless, no matter what the others said. If the king could see value in her, then she was not nothing. Her thoughts drifted back to the crisis that had consumed the palace for weeks. Queen and Zerin had left. The Alpha King's true mate had abandoned him and their pups. Some said she had run away with a lover. Josie's hands curled into fists. How could she? How could anyone leave King Tristan and those poor babies without a mother? The crying suddenly seemed louder. Or maybe Josie simply felt it more sharply. "How could she do that to such a good man?" Josie whispered to the walls. "And to her children." No answer came. There never was one. Chapter 2. Paula was on the morning shift today. Josie sensed it the moment she entered the kitchen, in the way the other servants kept their distance. Paula had that effect. She never raised her voice, she simply had a look that made people remember their manners. 2 kitchen maids stood nearby, pretending to chop vegetables, but clearly more interested in gossip. "My sister works in the family wing," one of them said. "She says it's driving everyone mad. The wet nurses work in shifts now, 4 hours each. Any longer, and they start crying themselves." The conversation faded, but Josie caught the end of it. Without a mother to soothe them, what do they expect? "You're late," Paula said without looking up. "Wash your hands." Josie obeyed. A ball of dough waited for her, and she gratefully sank her hands into it. Here, the crying was quieter. The world became bearable. Then, the door burst open. A woman in a wet nurse's uniform rushed into the kitchen, her cap crooked on her head. "Paula," she said, breathless. "Paula, please, you have to help me." Paula set down the dough and wiped her hands on her apron. "Catch your breath, Mara." But Mara could not catch her breath. "The princess," she said, her voice trembling. "They won't stop screaming. We've tried everything, but they keep crying and nothing calms them. It's been 4 weeks since the queen left." "Quiet," Paula said sharply. She turned to Mara and gripped her shoulders. "What do you need? You're still nursing, aren't you?" Mara clutched Paula's sleeves. "Please, we need someone else to try. Every wet nurse has failed. The king is furious. He's threatening to dismiss the entire staff if we don't." Paula's jaw tightened. "I'll come." When Paula turned back toward the table, Josie felt something cold and heavy settle in her stomach. The pleasant morning was over. Paula would leave, and Josie would be alone again. Unless... "Can I come with you?" The words escaped before Josie could stop them. Paula turned, one eyebrow raised. "What?" "Can I go with you? I can help. Bring something if needed. Clean cloths, water, whatever the babies need." Paula looked at her for a long moment. "She can carry my things," Mara said. But we need to hurry, please. Paula sighed. Fine, but you will stay quiet and touch nothing unless I tell you. They left the kitchen at nearly a run, following Mara through service corridors and up 3 flights of stairs into the family wing. Josie had never gone this deep into the palace before. The corridors here were wider, the floors polished marble instead of rough stone. But she barely noticed because with every step toward the royal nursery, the crying grew louder. This was not ordinary crying. It was something else. Raw, desperate, utterly unconsolable. The sound slipped beneath Josie's skin and settled in her bones. By the time they reached the nursery door, her hands were trembling. Mara pushed the door open. 2 cradles stood at the center of a beautiful room, carved from dark wood and draped in silk. And inside those cradles, 2 tiny bodies writhed and screamed with desperate force. 3 wet nurses stood by the window, their faces exhausted. They barely glanced at Paula as she entered. They've been fed, one said dully. Changed, burped, rocked. Nothing works. 4 hours, another added, eyes red. 4 hours and then we switch. You can't stay longer. You start hearing them even when they're quiet. Paula silently crossed to the nearest cradle. She lifted one of the babies, small, red-faced, fists flailing in the air, and pressed him to her chest. Shh, she whispered, rocking gently. Quiet now, little prince. The baby screamed even louder. Paula tried to feed him. He turned away, still sobbing. She rocked him, sang to him. Nothing changed. In the other cradle, his brother cried in perfect harmony. Josie's feet moved on their own. She crossed the room as if in a dream. She stopped beside the second cradle and looked down at a tiny, furious creature inside. His whole body trembled with the force of his crying. And then, Josie reached out toward the baby. He froze. His eyes flew open, wide, dark, startled. He looked at Josie as though he had never seen another person in his short life. She did not think. She simply opened her mouth and sang. It was a lullaby Paula used to sing to her when she was little, the only song Josie knew all the way through. Her voice was thin and uncertain, but the baby's breathing slowed. His tiny fist unclenched and reached for her finger. And in the cradle behind her, the second twin stopped crying. How? Mara began, but could not finish the question. For the first time in 4 weeks, the royal nursery became completely, impossibly silent. Chapter 3. The nursery became so quiet that Josie could hear the ticking clock on the mantel. Finally, Mara breathed, then louder. You're enchanted, girl. One of the other wet nurses stepped closer. For 4 weeks, we tried everything. Wet nurses, rocking, songs, nothing. And you just walk in and... Josie barely heard them. She could not take her eyes off the twins, off Vito's long lashes casting shadows across his round cheeks, off Theon's rosebud lips relaxed in sleep. They loved her. She could feel it. These perfect, royal, priceless little beings loved her without conditions, without judgment. For the first time since the king carried her from the garden all those years ago, Josie felt chosen. Can you bring her tomorrow morning? Mara asked Paula. Please? Paula's gaze stayed fixed on Josie, her expression unreadable. Yes, she said at last. We'll come. And a year passed like water slipping through cupped hands. A year in which Josie followed Paula through service corridors 3 times a day, slipping into the royal nursery like a secret. Mara and Paula tried to hide Josie's involvement for as long as possible. The other wet nurses swore to silence. But after a year, whispers began following Josie everywhere. Even the king couldn't soothe them, one servant said one day. But the wolfless kitchen girl can. I heard they start crying the moment she leaves the room, his friend replied. That's not normal. No one could explain why two royal princes clung to a nobody, to nothing, to a girl without a wolf. But Josie did not care about rumors. The king had once saved her, given her a place in his palace. And now, his sons needed her, chose her. She had Vito and Theon, and they had her. The morning sun was just rising over the eastern towers when Josie and Paula slipped into the nursery. The moment the door opened, two small heads lifted from their shared crib. Vito saw her first. His face lit up, and he let out a delighted squeal, bouncing and slapping his hands against the crib rail. Theon immediately joined in, bouncing and babbling with excitement. Josie's heart filled so suddenly it almost hurt. "Good morning, my little troublemakers," she said, hurrying toward them. She leaned over the rail and kissed the tops of their heads. First Vito, then Theon. Behind her, Paula clicked her tongue in disapproval. Vito grabbed her hair, and Theon tried climbing over the rail to reach her. The moment she lifted them into her arms, they relaxed and quieted immediately. She noticed Paula watching from the doorway, her expression warm but deeply troubled. Josie set the twins on the thick carpet and began their morning ritual, wiping their faces, dressing them in clean tunics while they squirmed and wriggled, and all the while she sang to them. The twins babbled back in their own language, making sounds that almost resembled words. Behind them, Paula moved quietly through the room, tidying and arranging things. After breakfast came playtime. The twins wanted to climb all over Josie, playing their version of peekaboo. She of course agreed. She always agreed. When she finally managed to catch both of them and settle them in her lap, they happily curled against her like pups seeking warmth. Within minutes, both began nodding sleepily. Josie held them close and hummed softly, rocking just a little. This was her favorite part, when they were sleepy and content, when their whole world narrowed down to her arms. She had never felt so needed, so completely, utterly loved. And she could not help thinking, the king must know. Maybe he would come see for himself. Maybe he would recognize her and understand that she was meant to care for his sons. Maybe he would smile at her the same way he had in the garden. "We need to talk," Paula said quietly. They stepped into the corridor, leaving the nursery door cracked open. "You are becoming too familiar with the young princes," Paula said. "You are forgetting your place." "I know my place. It's beside them because they need me," Josie answered defensively.
"No one else can calm them."
"I know, but that doesn't change who you are and who they are." Paula gripped Josie's shoulders. "You are a servant. They are princes. If the king discovers how attached you have become, there will be trouble." Josie pulled away. "His Majesty will be happy that his sons are so loved. He is kind. He saved me once. He'll understand." "Josie," Paula's voice carried a warning. "Think about what you're saying." "They need me. I'm special. Maybe that's why the king saved me." Paula looked at her for a long moment. "You think the king will accept you? Give you a place of honor?" Paula slowly shook her head. "These pups will grow up. And where will that leave you? Heartbroken, cast aside, or worse." "You don't know that," Josie said. "You are a servant, Josie. Never forget that." Paula turned and went back into the nursery, leaving Josie alone. But Josie could not believe it, because deep inside, she already carried a dream. She wanted the king to discover them, wanted him to see her with his sons, to see how much they loved her, and for him to love her too. He had already saved her once. Surely he would understand. 3 weeks later, it was an ordinary morning. Josie had dressed the twins in matching outfits, and they immediately ruined all her effort by crawling away the moment she set them down. "Vito, come back here!" He squealed and crawled faster. Josie lunged after him, and he shrieked with laughter. Theon, seeing his brother captured, crawled toward them at full speed, reaching for Josie with both hands. "Got you!" Josie laughed breathlessly. "Got you, my little monsters!" The nursery's double doors burst open with a crash, and the laughter caught in Josie's throat. King Tristan stood in the doorway, tall, radiant, impossibly handsome. But his gaze was fixed on her with such anger, such complete disgust, that Josie felt her stomach drop. The twins, sensing the shift in the room, froze. "Let go of my children." The king's voice was very quiet now. Chapter 4. The king moved so quickly that Josie did not have time to react. He grabbed one of the cradles and hurled it across the room. It slammed into the far wall with a deafening crash, splintering into pieces. The twins screamed. They clung to Josie with desperate force, their tiny bodies shaking violently, their cries sharp and frightened. Vito buried his face in her neck. Theon's nails dug into her arms so hard they drew blood. Josie instinctively wrapped her arms around them, staring at the king in complete confusion. Why was he so angry? Was he under some kind of spell? The nursery doors flew open, and Paula and Mara rushed inside. The king wheeled toward them. "Why?" he thundered. "Why is this servant touching my sons with her filthy hands?" The twins were sobbing now, their small bodies jerking with every breath. Josie barely heard them. Everything was wrong. What was her king saying? She struggled to stand on trembling legs, still holding the twins. "Your Majesty," Josie said, "please try to understand. Your sons need me." His gaze locked onto her again. The expression in his eyes, cold, cruel, utterly stripped of any former warmth, made the blood in her veins turn to ice. "Need you?" His voice dropped low, and somehow that was worse than shouting. "Why would the heirs to my throne need you?" He took a step toward her, and she instinctively stepped back. "You are nothing, less than nothing. You are a servant, and a wolfless one at that," he snapped. "Take your filthy hands off my sons." Paula and Mara seemed to come out of their shock. "Sir," Paula said, "the girl has some kind of bond with the children. I will make sure she remembers her place, but perhaps—" "Get her out of here!" the king roared. His scent, sour, furious, the scent of an enraged alpha, was suffocating. "If I ever see her so much as look at my boys again," he said, "I will have her whipped in the courtyard and thrown from the palace to die in the forest like the worthless thing she is." Josie's knees gave out. She collapsed to the floor, still clutching the twins, and the sob that tore from her chest was animal in its force. "No," she gasped. "Please, please, I'll only come at night." "Josie." Paula's hand closed around her elbow, trying to pull her up. "Come on." Mara took her other arm, and together they tried to lift her. But Josie could not make her legs move. "No," she cried. The king stepped forward and seized the twins by their collars, wrenching them from Josie's arms with such force that Vito nearly fell. The boys screamed, high, terrified cries that sliced through Josie like knives. "Please!" Josie reached desperately for them, but Paula and Mara were already gripping her arms, dragging her backward. The twins fought against their father's hold, their little bodies twisting, their hands reaching toward Josie. They cried so hard they could barely breathe. Then the door shut, and the sound became muffled, distant, but it did not disappear. Josie immediately curled onto her side, pulling her knees to her chest, sobbing into her hands. Somewhere far away, she felt Paula's rough palm stroking her hair. "I tried to warn you, child," she said. "They were never yours." The word should have hurt, should have cut, but Josie could not truly process them. I don't understand, she sobbed. Why was he so angry? I was helping them. They were happy. I made them happy. Josie, maybe if I write him a letter to explain. Paula's hand stilled in her hair. Child, no, you cannot. Or, or I can wait until he calms down and then go to him and remind him that he saved me once in the garden. Remember when I was little? Josie, listen to me. But Josie could not stop. The words poured out faster and faster. It's because the queen left, isn't it? He's upset because his mate abandoned him. And he saw me with his sons, and it reminded him. That's why he got so angry. That has to be it. He's a good man, Paula, you know that. He would never hurt me on purpose. He gave me a home. So if I just wait until he feels better, until he stops hurting over Queen and Zarin, then I can explain everything and he'll understand and let me see them again. No. Paula's voice turned firm, almost harsh. No, Josie, he won't. But he has to. Josie sat up abruptly, tears streaming down her face. The twins need me. You heard them, didn't you? They were so scared, and they wanted me. She broke into sobs again, her body shaking violently. In that beautiful nursery, 2 babies were crying for her right now, and she was not allowed to go to them. So there had to be a way to fix this. There had to be. Chapter 5. 3 days had passed since the king threw Josie out of the nursery, and the twins' cries had become part of the palace architecture. Josie stood at the kitchen wash basin, her hands red and wrinkled from cold water. Why doesn't she just go to them? Someone whispered behind her, probably one of the kitchen maids. Shh, another voice hissed in reply. Josie's vision darkened. At least Paula and Mara had not told anyone what had really happened in the nursery. The other servants only knew that Josie had cared for the princess and was now forbidden from seeing them. They did not know about the shattered cradle, the king's fury, the terrible things he had said. They did not know that he had called her nothing. Josie's hands went still in the water. None of it made sense. None of it. The king had been so angry, angrier than seemed possible for a good man. He had looked at her like she was a parasite. But all she had done was love his children. All she had done was make them happy. There had to be a reason. Some explanation she was missing. He had been upset about something else, the queen leaving, and taken it out on her because she happened to be there. Or maybe he had been trying to protect her somehow. Josie. Chef Margrave's voice pulled her from the whirlpool of thoughts. That pot is clean. Take the next one. Yes, chef, she whispered. Josie was already heading toward the corridor leading to her room when the kitchen door burst open. Have you heard the news? A footman rushed in. Word from the north. Queen Nazarene, she's alive. She's gathered an army. She's declared war to reclaim her sons. The kitchen erupted into whispers. Josie felt the words crash over her like cold water. Through the sudden noise of voices, the twins' cries seemed louder somehow, more urgent, more desperate, as if they knew. King Tristan has declared Queen Nazarene a traitor, the footman continued. The palace is sealed. No one enters or leaves until further notice. The whispers faded. The weight of the announcement settled over everyone like a physical thing. They were trapped, locked inside a palace under siege, with 2 inconsolable babies whose mother was coming for them by force. That evening, Josie lay on her thin mattress in the dark, staring at a ceiling she could not see. She thought about Vito and Theon, alone in that nursery. Were wet nurses with them? Was anyone holding them? Or were they simply lying in their new cradle, exhausted and frightened, crying themselves hoarse? I could help them, Josie thought desperately. Even just a little. She slowly sat up, her heart beginning to race. This wasn't only about her. And it wasn't only about the twins. The entire palace was on edge. Surely the king would understand that. Surely he would see that she was trying to help. Her feet began moving before she made a conscious decision. The nursery was lit by a dim lamp when Josie carefully pushed open the door. The crying hit her like a wave. Here it was louder, closer, more desperate than it had been in all 3 days. The twins lay in a new cradle, hastily made, nowhere near as beautiful as the one the king had destroyed. The moment they saw her, they lunged toward the rails, reaching for her with both hands, their faces red and swollen from crying. They had been left alone. No wet nurse nearby, no one holding them, comforting them, or even sitting beside them while they cried. Josie's heart shattered. "Oh, my little ones," she whispered, rushing to them. She gathered them into her arms, heavier now, warm, trembling, and they clung to her with desperate strength. They buried their faces against her shoulder and neck, making small, broken sounds that were somehow worse than screaming. "Shh," she whispered, rocking them gently. "Quiet now." The crying stopped. The twins melted against her, their small bodies relaxing from exhaustion. Within moments, their breathing evened out. They fell asleep, truly, deeply, perhaps for the first time in a long while. Josie held them close, tears slipping down her face. She knew she should not stay. She had done what she came to do. The twins were calm and sleeping. She needed to leave. "I warned you." Josie spun around, her heart stopping. King Tristan stood in the doorway. Palace guards flanked him on both sides. His anger was no longer explosive. Now it was cold, controlled. "Can't you see?" Josie said desperately. "I can help them." "Take her," the king told the guards. Rough hands seized Josie's arms while others tore the twins from her grasp. She was dragged toward the door. Behind her, the twins stirred and began crying again. Frightened, confused sounds. "Please!" Josie struggled, trying to catch one last glimpse of them, but she was already being pulled into the corridor. The dungeon was cold and dark and smelled of mold and old fear. The guards shoved Josie into a cell without ceremony. "By order of the king," one said flatly. "At dawn, you will be hanged for treason." A sound broke from her lips. She was 13 years old. She had only wanted to help, to love, to be loved. How could that be treason? Josie crawled into the corner of the cell and curled onto her side. All this time, she had been wrong. The king had never been kind. He had never saved her. She had built an entire fantasy around a man who did not exist. And now, she would die because of it. Chapter 6. At some point, the sharp terror dulled into something more bearable. An empty, numb acceptance. Josie was going to die. That was a fact. Now she sat with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, waiting. Then she heard soft footsteps and quiet whimpering. Josie lifted her head sharply. She crawled toward the bars. When she reached them, 2 small shapes appeared in the dim torchlight. Wolf pups. Tiny, fluffy, stumbling over paws that seemed too large for their bodies. Their fur was dark, and they were no bigger than house cats. Josie's breath caught. "Vito," she whispered. "Theon, what happened to you?" The pups saw her face, and their soft whimpers turned into excited yips. They tumbled over one another trying to reach her, their paws sliding across the stone floor. Vito pushed his little nose through the bars and began licking her fingers. Theon squeezed beside him, trying to shove his entire head between the bars. A tear slid down Josie's cheek. They had shifted, but they were too young, impossibly young. Even Josie knew children did not shift before 8 or 9 years old. The earliest she had ever heard of was 4. The twins were not even 2. "You were too scared," weren't you?" Josie whispered. Theon tried to squeeze between the bars, his pudgy puppy body getting stuck halfway through. Despite everything, a laugh escaped Josie. "You're ridiculous," she told them. "Both of you." Vito's nose twitched. He caught a scent from across the corridor. He darted toward it, took 3 steps, then tangled in his own paws and flipped head over heels. Theon raced after him, tripped over his own feet, and crashed directly into him. The 2 pups rolled together and came to a stop beside a tall stool. Josie's heart leapt. Something gleamed atop the stool in the torchlight. Metal. Keys. And beside the stool, what had drawn Vito there? A crust of bread. "Bread," Josie whispered desperately. "Get the bread!" Both pups lunged for it. A lively struggle broke out. They rolled and shoved, bumping into the stool leg. The stool wobbled. "Yes, more," Josie urged desperately. But the pups had already forgotten the bread and were roughhousing again, yipping loudly. Josie let out a high-pitched squeak. Both pups froze and looked at her. "Come here!" They started toward her, but Vito became distracted by his own tail. Theon shoved his nose into a crack in the floor. Josie squeaked again. Theon ran toward her cage, but suddenly veered off after spotting the bread crust. He grabbed it and shook it. Vito rushed over to steal it. They collided again beside the stool. It rocked dangerously. The pups abandoned the bread and started climbing over each other. Theon bounced sideways and struck the stool leg. The stool tipped over. The keys flew into the air and crashed onto the stone floor with a loud clatter. The pups jumped in surprise, then became fascinated by the new object. Vito tried to pick up the ring of keys in his teeth. Too heavy. He dropped them, shaking his head. Theon slapped at them with his paw. The keys jingled. He hit them again, harder. They slid farther across the floor, away from Josie. "No, no, this way!" She reached desperately through the bars. The pups kept tumbling around on top of them, ignoring her pleas. Then Vito's paw became tangled in the keyring. He panicked and started backing away. The keys dragged behind him, rattling. He backed directly toward Josie's cell. Theon grabbed the other end of the ring with his teeth and pulled the opposite direction. They moved chaotically, sideways, but gradually brought the keys closer to Josie. "Yes, yes, just a little more," she whispered. Vito jerked backward. Theon's teeth slipped and he rolled back, straight toward the cell. The momentum pulled Vito forward. Both pups and the keys ended up directly in front of the bars. Josie's hands shot through instantly and grabbed the ring. "Good boys," she whispered, crying. "You wonderful, silly, perfect boys." The pups sat panting, tongues hanging out, pleased with themselves. Josie's trembling hands sorted through the keys. The first one, wrong. The second, wrong. The pups began licking each other. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth. It slid into the lock with a soft click. She turned it. The cell door opened. Josie fell to her knees, and the pups immediately rushed to her, climbing into her lap and licking her face. "You saved me," she whispered, hugging them. Vito yipped proudly. Theon buried his face in her neck and sighed in contentment. Josie rose on shaking legs and ran. She stumbled through the dungeon corridors, climbing toward torchlight. The pups were heavy, warm, occasionally squirming, but mostly quiet. She burst through the kitchen door and froze. Paula stood at the table, a knife in her hand. "Josie?" Her voice was nearly a whisper. "They said you'd been taken to the dungeon." Her gaze dropped to the pups, and her words died away. Paula set down the knife. "We need to get you out of here," she said, already moving. She grabbed the canvas sack and began stuffing supplies into it. "And those pups need to be returned to their mother." Paula spread a map across the table, tracing a route northward. I am loyal to Queen Nazarene. I always have been. She is gathering forces here in the Northern Territories. Her voice hardened. The king is a dangerous man. He will hurt you. He will even hurt his own sons. But the queen, she will protect you. Take them. Go north. Josie's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. Please, come with me. Paula's face softened. I'll stay. I'll throw them off your trail. Buy you time. But you must hurry. She pressed the map into Josie's hand and helped sling the sack over her shoulder. Somewhere above, an alarm bell began ringing. Paula pulled Josie into a fierce embrace. Go, she said. Take care of yourself. You're my only family, Paula. I love you. Josie's voice broke. Paula's eyes glistened. She brushed away a tear, then grabbed Josie's hand and pulled her toward the corner of the kitchen. She yanked back a rug, revealing a hatch in the floor. There's a passage here, Paula said, pulling it open. It leads beyond the palace walls. Head northwest, into the forest. Don't stop. Footsteps and shouting echoed outside. Thank you, Josie whispered, for everything. The stern expression on Paula's face cracked. Go, child. Josie climbed down into the passage. Paula shut the hatch, and the last thing Josie saw was her face before darkness swallowed everything. Josie stood in the darkness, clutching the 2 wolf pups who had saved her life. All right, she whispered to them. Northwest, to your mother, to the queen. Chapter 7. Josie ran through the dark forest, her heart torn in 2. Somewhere behind her, back in that palace, Paula remained. The only person who had ever truly loved her, and Josie had left her there. Guilt sat heavy in her chest, as heavy as the pups in her arms and the sack on her back. But she could not stop. She had to get the twins somewhere safe. The pups were heavier than she had expected, dense, squirming weight that never stayed still. The sack dug into her shoulders with every step, but she kept moving. Only when the forest thickened did Josie finally slow. She fumbled for the map Paula had given her. Northwest. Paula had said northwest. But where was that? A howl cut through the night, distant but unmistakable. Tracking wolves. The map crumpled in Josie's trembling hands as she shoved it back away. No time. Run. The pups whimpered when she broke into motion again. She held them tighter and forced her way through thick undergrowth. Behind her, the howling grew louder. Now she could hear human voices too. Faster, she whispered breathlessly to herself. Come on, faster. But her legs were already failing her. Her knees trembled with every step. Without the map, without direction, Josie knew she was getting lost. Ahead, amber eyes flashed between the trees. Josie veered sharply left, crashing through bushes that tore at her clothes. The pups whimpered. Quiet, she pleaded. But they were frightened, making small, pitiful sounds that felt far too loud. Growling drew closer. The pounding of paws against the earth came nearer and nearer. And then Josie stumbled. She fell behind a massive oak and dropped to the ground. This was it. She could go no farther. Quiet, my little ones, she whispered in a trembling voice. But the pups were too frightened. They whimpered and shook. In the darkness, amber eyes blinked closer. Growls circled them. 3, maybe 4 wolves prowled around the oak. Josie pressed her back against the bark. She had no chance. The pups' whining grew louder. They could not help it. They were children, terrified and exhausted. And then, something huge moved in the undergrowth. The nearest wolf turned, and from the darkness burst a beast unlike anything Josie had ever seen. He was enormous, twice the size of palace wolves. His muzzle was scarred and mangled. He slammed into the first wolf with such force that it flew backward. The attack was brutal, merciless. Another wolf leapt onto his back, but he shook it off, hurling it into a tree with a sickening crack. Josie pressed herself harder against the oak, eyes wide with horror. Palace guards burst through the bushes with swords drawn. "A rogue wolf! Kill it!" The lone wolf rose and unleashed a howl that made the trees themselves tremble. The guards recoiled, their swords shaking in their hands. The wolf dropped to all fours and lunged. The guards scattered, crashing through brush in panic. And then there was silence. The trackers were dead or gone. The guards had disappeared. The enormous wolf turned toward Josie's hiding place. His eyes, pale gold in the moonlight, met hers. He stepped forward. Josie bolted. She did not think. She only clutched the pups tighter and ran. Behind her came an amused snort, almost like laughter, followed by pursuit. The wolf was faster, but he did not attack. He simply followed. Josie spotted a cluster of large boulders and dove toward them, squeezing into a narrow gap. The space barely fit her, but she forced herself inside. For a long time, there was silence. Then, the sound of bones cracking, the sound of shifting. Josie clapped a hand over her mouth. The pups, exhausted, finally fell quiet. "Well?" came a deep male voice nearby, carrying a hint of amusement. "That's quite a way to thank someone for saving your life." Josie said nothing. The voice continued calmly. "Those palace wolves were about to tear you apart, girl. Can't say I've ever been avoided this enthusiastically after a rescue." There was the rustle of fabric. He was dressing. "You can come out," the voice said. "I won't hurt you."
If I wanted to, I'd have left you to the trackers.
Josie did not move. A sigh. "All right, let's see." Footsteps circled her hiding place once, twice, then stopped directly in front of the gap. A man's face appeared in the opening. He looked around 40, long, untidy hair streaked with gray. But his eyes, pale, wolfish, were sharp, and beneath the weariness lay something that resembled kindness. "There you are," he said calmly. "What are you doing in there? Not the most comfortable place." Josie stared at him, trembling. He studied her. Then his expression softened. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just saved you from people who very much wanted to. Remember?" Josie's voice cracked. "You killed them." The man shrugged. "Some of them." He said it without apology. "They were hunting a child carrying babies. I don't care for that." Josie's arms tightened around the twins. The man noticed and chuckled quietly. "Easy there, wolf mother. I'm not going to take them from you." He sat down a few steps away. "I'm Bram. What's your name?" When Josie did not answer, he shrugged again. "That's all right, but you should probably come out of there. Those guards will regroup sooner or later." "How do I know you won't take me back to the palace?" Josie asked. Bram's expression hardened. "Because I'd sooner cut off my own hand than help that bastard king with anything." The venom in his voice was real, rough-edged, and slowly, carefully, Josie began crawling out of her hiding place. Chapter 8. Josie looked up at Bram's tall figure, her heart pounding wildly. She desperately wanted to trust him, but trust had only ever brought her pain. "You don't like King Tristan?" she asked almost in a whisper. Bram growled, "The king has no honor. I would rather live without a pack than belong to his." Encouraged by his obvious hatred, Josie took a chance. She adjusted the twins slightly in her arms. They had fallen asleep while she was hiding. "They're the king's sons," she said, nodding toward them. "I need to return them to their mother." Her voice trembled. Will Will you help me? Bram looked at the sleeping boys, then back at Josie. These are the princes? He asked, stunned. Josie nodded. And they're here alone? With a 10-year-old girl? He asked in disbelief. Josie snorted. I'm almost 13, and I'm all they have. She looked down at the sleeping pups. And they're all I have. Something shifted in Bram's expression. He sighed, took the map, and studied it quickly in the moonlight. I'll get you to the river crossing, he said gruffly. About half a day from here. After that, you're on your own. Relief washed over Josie. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Bram said, already turning deeper into the forest. We need to cover ground before sunrise. Can you walk? The river crossing came and went. Bram did not leave. The current's too strong here, he said without slowing. We need to head upstream. A few more hours. Those few hours became an entire day, then another. There's a village here, Bram announced on the third morning. King's supporters. We'll have to go around. That's another day, maybe two. By the end of the first week, Bram was still with them. Josie stopped asking questions. She simply accepted that he was staying. The day settled into a rhythm, almost peaceful. Bram taught her how to set snares. At night, they slept in a particular arrangement. Bram lay in his enormous wolf form. Josie slept with her back pressed to his warm side, while the pups curled against her stomach. One morning, Josie watched in horror as Vito discovered one of the snares. The pup approached cautiously and jumped. The snare snapped instantly, tangling Vito in ropes. He yelped, thrashing wildly. Theon rushed to help and got tangled too. Within seconds, both pups had become a squealing knot of fur and rope. Josie rushed toward them, but Bram was already there. He knelt down and calmly untangled them with his large, scarred hands. Easy there, little warriors, he murmured. You conquered the terrifying rope trap. Very impressive. Once freed, Vito shook himself indignantly and immediately tried attacking the remains of the snare. Bram's lips twitched. He glanced at Josie, who was barely holding back laughter. They're going to destroy all my traps, aren't they? He asked. Most likely, Josie admitted. Bram sighed. That night, once the twins had fallen asleep, Bram tossed another branch into the fire. We'll reach the foothills tomorrow, he said. Then about 3 more days to the Northern Territories. Josie's heart tightened. And then you leave. Bram did not answer immediately. He stirred the coals. I left Tristan's pack when he banished my brother, he said quietly at last. My brother was injured in one of the king's wars. The wound never healed properly. He couldn't shift right anymore. He shook his head. Tristan said he was too weak. Josie watched him in the firelight, seeing the pain etched into his face. I should have left with him then, Bram continued. But I stayed, told myself I was a man of honor. A few weeks later, I found him dead. He looked up at Josie, his eyes hard. If I had left when he needed me, he'd still be alive. Josie's eyes stung. The Alpha King destroys anyone he considers unworthy, Bram said roughly. But I won't let that happen to you. I won't let anyone hurt you or these boys. Josie believed him. Sleep, Bram said. Tomorrow will be long. She was drifting off when the first howl tore through the forest. Josie's eyes snapped open. Bram was already on his feet. Get behind a tree. Take the pups and the supplies. Stay low and don't move. Josie grabbed the sack and lifted the pups. Shadows moved through the trees. Tracking wolves. At least 4. Along with guards carrying torches and swords. Bram lunged forward and attacked the first wolf before it reached the camp. The fight was savage. One of the guards broke through directly toward Josie. Without thinking, she kicked the burning coals toward him. Hot embers scattered across his face and he screamed. Bram was beside him instantly, driving a branch into his chest. The others retreated. But then Bram made a sound. A low groan of pain cut through the night, and cold ran down Josie's spine. She rushed out from behind the tree. Bram had dropped to one knee, one hand pressed against his side. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark and far too much of it. "Bram," Josie's voice broke. "It's not healing. Why isn't it healing?" "Poison," he forced out through clenched teeth. "What do we do?" Bram tried to stand and failed. "There'll be more. They heard the fight. We have to move." "You need to rest." "It's not safe," he tried again. "We move now." Josie looked at him. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We move, but I'm helping you walk." Bram grabbed her hand and pushed himself upright. He swayed, and Josie took some of his weight. Together, they staggered forward into the darkness of the forest. They had to make it. Chapter 9. They crossed into land that finally became level. Rocky, sparse, but after the dense forest, it felt almost blessedly open. Bram walked beside her, leaning heavily against Josie's shoulder. Every step cost him effort, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. But they were close now. Josie looked up and saw it. Spread across a wide valley was an enormous camp. Dozens of tents, campfires sending black smoke into the gray sky. People moved between them with clear purpose. An army. "Bram?" Josie's voice trembled. "I think we made it." Bram lifted his head with effort. They moved forward, one agonizing step at a time. The camp buzzed with life. Soldiers sharpened weapons, blacksmiths worked at glowing forges, scouts delivered reports. At first, no one noticed them. "Someone!" Josie called. "Please, help!" A few soldiers glanced over but kept walking. "Please!" she shouted with all the strength she had left. People began turning. They saw a filthy girl supporting a bleeding man and carrying 2 wolf pups. And then Bram's legs gave out. He collapsed, dragging Josie down with him. They hit the rocky ground hard. Bram made no sound. He did not move. Suddenly, everything around them shifted. Soldiers, camp workers, a woman dressed as a healer. The twins ran to Josie, whining pitifully. A woman with streaks of gray in her hair knelt beside Bram and turned him over. She shot Josie a sharp look. "What happened, child?" The words spilled from Josie all at once. "King Tristan's soldiers attacked us. Bram fought them off, but one of them had a poisoned blade." The woman examined the wound. "I need to find the queen," Josie said desperately. "The twins need—" "Fetch Her Majesty," the woman called out. A soldier ran. "What's your name?" she asked. "Josie." "I'm Pandra. I'll help your friend." Soldiers brought a stretcher and carefully lifted Bram onto it. His eyes were closed, his face pale, but his chest still rose and fell. Pandra glanced at the wolf pups. "It's rare to shift so young." Josie pulled them closer. "They're special." Then, a commanding woman's voice rang out. "What is happening here?" The crowd parted. The queen appeared. Josie knew instantly who she was. Tall, regal, beautiful, even in battle leathers. Dark hair braided into a sapphire plait. Her gaze swept over the scene and stopped on the wolf pups at Josie's feet. Recognition and disbelief flashed across her face. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, and she ran. She dropped to her knees and gathered the pups into her arms. "My babies," she sobbed. "My babies! You came back to me!" She held them tightly, her body trembling. The pups pressed into her, nuzzling close, their tails wagging faintly. They recognized their mother's scent immediately. Silence spread through the camp. Who? She pulled back, her voice shaking. Who brought you to me? The queen's gaze settled on Josie. Her face went pale. You, she whispered. Cold ran down Josie's spine. They were lost without you, Josie said quickly. I tried to keep them safe. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Nazarene stepped closer and cupped Josie's face in both hands. Her touch was warm, gentle. Her eyes brimmed with tears. You brought my sons back to me, she said in a trembling voice. I tried, Josie whispered. Up close, Josie could see the queen's hands shaking. See the way her gaze studied Josie's face with almost desperate intensity. The queen pulled her into an embrace. Josie froze in surprise, but the queen held her with the same fierce relief she had shown her sons. Thank you, Nazarene whispered into her hair. When they pulled apart, the queen still held Josie's face. What is your name, child? Josie. The queen flinched as if the name struck her. Josie, she repeated. How old are you? 13, I think. Nazarene closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were full of tears. She pulled Josie close once more and kissed her forehead. Behind them, Pandra called out, Your Majesty, the wounded man! He needs the healing tent immediately! Nazarene stepped back, but kept one hand on Josie's shoulder. Who is he? Bram, he helped us, protected us. Josie's voice shook. Determination flashed in the queen's eyes. Take him to my personal healer. Use whatever is necessary. I want him to live. Pandra nodded and followed the stretcher. Nazarene turned back to Josie, brushing a strand of dirty hair from her face. You must be exhausted. When did you last eat? Sleep? Josie could not remember. I'm all right. The twins, they're home. Nazarene smiled through her tears. And so are you. You are home too. Josie frowned. All she could think about was Bram lying pale on the stretcher and the warm bodies of the pups beside her. They were here, safe, and the queen was holding her as though she were something precious. Josie did not understand any of it. Chapter 10. Josie woke to the warmth of two small bodies pressed against her chest. The wolf pups lay on top of her, their breathing steady and peaceful. And nearby, seated in a chair, was Queen Nazarene. Josie's heart jumped. Nazarene gently lifted a hand. Quiet, you're safe. Josie sank back into the pillows, holding the twins closer. The queen's expression softened. Thank you again. I don't think I could ever repay what you've done. Josie nodded, not trusting her voice. Nazarene studied her face carefully and frowned. Is something wrong? Are you still hungry? Cold? Do you need anything? Josie shook her head and looked away. She stroked the pup's soft fur, focusing on the feeling beneath her fingers instead of the queen's attentive gaze. She wanted to ask about Bram, but she did not know if she had the right to ask anything of a queen. Nazarene's voice was gentle. It's all right, child. If you need something, you can tell me. Josie hesitated. She had trusted a king once before, built an entire world around his imagined kindness. She would not be foolish again. But Nazarene slowly reached out a hand, and Josie instinctively flinched away. The queen froze. Her scent changed. Not angry, but sad. Painfully sad. Nazarene withdrew her hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you. Josie swallowed hard. The queen did not look angry. She did not look dangerous. She glanced toward the pups with concern, and the words slipped out before Josie could stop them. Quiet, frightened. They haven't shifted back. Nazarene leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? Josie's throat tightened. Since we left the castle, they've stayed pups the whole time, and I don't know why. Her voice trembled, tears burning her eyes. I was supposed to keep them safe. I should have done better. Stop, Nazarene said firmly, but gently. This is not your fault. Josie shook her head. But I took care of them. They are babies, Nazarene said, her own voice shaking. Babies taken from their home, from everything familiar to them. Babies need stability, safety, familiar surroundings. Of course they were frightened. She paused. Even their own mother, a queen with an army, could not have prevented this. So this is absolutely not your fault. Do you understand? Josie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The queen continued. You were incredibly brave. You saved them. You kept them alive and brought them home when no one else could have. Her voice broke. I am so proud of you. The words settled over Josie like a warm blanket. She did not understand why the queen looked at her that way, but something inside her loosened. Can I see Bram? Josie asked quietly. I need to know, is he going to be all right? Surprise flickered across Nazarene's face, but she quickly composed herself. How about you rest a little longer? I'll go check on him and ask the healer whether you can visit him later. Okay. Despite the tension inside her, Josie nodded. Nazarene stood. Rest. You're safe, I promise. Josie tried not to fall asleep, but the bed was so soft and the twins so warm that sleep washed over her like a wave. When she woke again, the tent was darker, and the queen had not returned. Josie carefully slipped out from beneath the sleeping pups. She needed to find Bram, to see for herself that he was all right. She stepped outside quietly and let her nose guide her. Even without a wolf of her own, she could still catch Bram's scent. It led her to a large tent near the edge of camp. Inside, a soldier dozed near the entrance. Beyond him were rows of cots filled with wounded men, and at the far end lay Bram. He was unconscious, his chest bandaged, and beside him, bent over his wound, stood Queen Nazarene. Josie froze. Suddenly, Bram's eyes snapped open. He jerked upright and pressed a knife to Nazarene's throat. Where are the children? He growled. Nazarene did not even flinch. She slowly raised a hand and gently pushed the knife away. They're safe, sleeping, she said calmly. She helped him lie back down while he blinked, trying to focus. You, the queen, he breathed. The twins' mother. Nazarene nodded. Bram stared at her for a long moment, frowning. Have we met before? I don't think so. Why? Your scent seems familiar, he said confused. Then he seemed to remember where he was. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... No apology needed, Nazarene interrupted. You protected my children even while unconscious. She paused. I owe you greatly for bringing them back to me. Bram shrugged awkwardly. It was all Josie. She got them out of the palace, kept them alive. She's a brave girl. The queen visibly stiffened, though her face remained calm. Yes, she nodded. She is. Bram watched her closely. What are you going to do with her? What do you mean? Bram pushed himself upright despite the pain. She brought your children back. Great, happy for you. But what happens to her now? Josie held her breath. She pressed herself against the tent wall, her heart pounding. I'm not sending her back to the king, if that's what you mean, Nazarene said. Good to hear, Bram answered sharply. But there's a difference between not sending her to die and actually taking care of her. She's a child. She needs someone who'll look after her. Look after her? Nazarene repeated. You know what I mean, Bram said. Someone who stays. I assure you, the child will be cared for, the queen said, looking away. Bram sighed. It's not just food and a roof. "What are you trying to say?" she asked quietly. "I could take her," Bram said, meeting her eyes again. "I'd care for her." Josie clapped a hand over her mouth to hold back a gasp. "You would do that?" Nazarene asked, genuinely moved. Bram shrugged awkwardly. "Someone should. Might as well be me." Nazarene was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "It's a noble offer, but I can't accept it. Josie will stay here, with me." "Why?" Bram frowned. "Did you even ask her if she wants—" "Because she's mine," Nazarene interrupted. Bram stared at her. "Josie is my daughter," the queen continued. Hidden in the shadows, Josie felt the world tilt sideways. "You're serious?" Bram muttered. "You said yourself my scent felt familiar." Bram's eyes widened as understanding crashed over him. "You mean Josie is a princess? And that's why she smells like you?" Nazarene nodded. "Yes," she said. "A princess. The firstborn daughter of King Tristan and his heir. The one he rejected the moment he learned she could not shift." Josie staggered, catching herself against the tent wall. The king she had worshipped, was her father. "When Josie was born without a wolf, it did not matter to me. I loved her," Nazarene said. "She was beautiful. Mine." Her voice hardened. "But Tristan, he was furious. He demanded our daughter be killed. Said she was defective, a disgrace." Josie could not breathe. "I begged for her life," Nazarene continued. "I promised I would try to give him healthy wolves, over and over again, but only if he let her live." "And he agreed?" Bram asked. "Yes," the woman's voice trembled. "But to keep me obedient, he took her from me. Josie, my baby." Tears streamed down her face. "I was not allowed to hold her, feed her, not even see her. Not until I gave him an heir, a true heir. I was a prisoner in my own palace for 12 years, enduring miscarriage after miscarriage, while my daughter lived floors below me, and I could not even speak to her." Bram swore under his breath. "Bastard. Absolute bastard." "But even that wasn't enough," Nazarene said, her voice hollow. "When the twins were born, when I finally gave him what he wanted, he still refused to let me see her." She paused. "That's when I realized he never intended to keep his word. That Josie was not safe. That none of my children were safe. I tried to escape with all 3 of them. I was caught. Tristan accused me of treason, planned to execute me before the entire court. But loyal people, servants like Paula, helped me escape." Josie's heart clenched at Paula's name. "I fled to my family, to my old pack," Nazarene finished. "I raised an army, declared war, not for the throne. I don't care about the throne, but for my children." Silence followed. Josie stepped back, her hand slipping from the tent wall. She turned to run, but she made it only a few steps before a hand touched her shoulder gently. "Josie." She turned. Nazarene stood before her, tears running down her face. Their eyes met. "Is it true?" Josie asked. Nazarene nodded, and Josie broke down, heavy, broken sobs tearing from her chest. "You have to keep fighting," she said. "You have to stop him. For Paula, for everyone he's hurt." "I will," Nazarene vowed. "I promise." Josie threw herself into her arms. The queen caught her, holding her tightly, and they both cried. For the lost years, for the cruelty they had survived, for Paula's sacrifice, for everything that had been taken from them, but also for the impossible miracle. Despite everything, they had found each other again. Epilogue. Bram's recovery was slow but steady, and Josie visited him every day. At first she came alone, sitting quietly beside him and telling him stories about the twins. But over time she noticed she was not his only visitor. One evening, as the setting sun painted the tent walls amber, Josie approached and found Nazarene already there. The queen sat beside Bram with her sleeves rolled up, carefully unwrapping the bandages around his body. Bram looked at her with an expression Josie had never seen before. "You're terrible at following orders, you know," he said with a grin. Nazarene answered softly, and Bram huffed, wincing. "I'm pretty sure I told you to stop fussing and let the healers do their job." "And I'm pretty sure I told you to stop being stubborn." Bram gently took her wrist. "I'm serious, Your Majesty. You don't have to." "I want to." Their eyes met, and something warm, quiet, lingered between them. Josie suddenly felt like an intruder. She smiled and quietly slipped away. The twins were exactly where she had left them. Two wolf pups playing with wooden toys outside the tent. They had started shifting back into humans a week after arriving. Josie had woken one morning to find two little boys instead of pups, and had nearly cried with relief. Now they shifted constantly, as if trying to make up for lost time. Theon spotted a butterfly and nudged it with his nose. "Yes, I see. It's beautiful. Just be careful." Too late. Theon pounced. Vito raced after him. Within seconds, they were tumbling through the grass, yipping happily. Josie laughed and lay back, feeling the warmth of the sun. The sky above her changed colors, gold to pink, then purple. She heard footsteps and opened her eyes. Nazarene stood nearby, silhouetted against the sunset. "How's Bram?" Josie asked. "Recovering." There was something soft in her eyes. Still stubborn as ever, but getting stronger. They sat together in silence. The pups grew tired and returned. Theon curled up in Nazarene's lap, while Vito dropped beside Josie with a heavy sigh. As darkness settled and stars lit the sky, Bram emerged from the tent. He lowered himself beside them with a quiet groan. "Should you really be up already?" Josie asked. "And should you really be fussing over me?" he answered. Vito yipped happily and climbed into his lap. Bram winced but adjusted him comfortably. "You're getting heavier, little warrior." Theon lifted his head. "You stay with your mother," Bram said. "There aren't enough laps for everyone." Josie caught the way Bram and Nazarene looked at each other, warm, understanding. Then Nazarene smiled at Josie. "They love you. They trusted you when they could trust no one else." "Because I smell like you," Josie said quietly. "Because you are their sister," Nazarene corrected softly. The fire crackled, sparks rising into the star-filled sky. Josie looked at her new family, her mother beside her, Theon in her lap, Bram holding Feto. Tomorrow would bring preparations for war again. King Tristan would not surrender easily. But tonight, in this short, perfect moment, they were simply a family.